This is ADEC Academy. ADEC Academy. I'm going to be presenting, or perhaps like giving a short lecture concerning about the issue and the topic of philosophy. The title of the lecture is called "The Evolution of Philosophy Argued." Now the question would be, who will be arguing? Everybody's arguing about the issue of philosophy, but I will actually tap into all the philosophical champions that have actually mentioned on our advertisement, which is the first is the one that I'll be presenting this evening, which is called Socrates, the first moralist. I'm going to give I will actually give a brief view about the well-known information out there, and after that then I'll give my view as to what are my thoughts or what are my views based on the presentation of the lecture that I will be actually giving to you, so that we can really understand the points that quite needs sort of like a more illustration of more explanation and more elaborating on these contents that I'll be talking about. First, Socrates is a moralist because he's a person, in his point of view, like he's a person that actually talked about the purpose of being moral. So he's a moralist in that regard. So he's one of the well-known philosophers. There's quite actually lots of philosophers before him, but obviously he's the one who's outstanding because of his point that he was standing for, because he was standing for being a moral human being. I will touch base on that briefly so that everybody can understand and also see the insights that Socrates was actually seeing, was sharing, and everything that he was doing in his time, and some things that were making him different to stand out compared with other, pre-Socrates, that is the other philosophers that he was actually with at that time. First of all, I'll read to this book that Socrates, without writing a single word, is arguably the most important philosopher in history of Western thought. He took to the streets of Athens to reason with and question his fellow citizens by raising philosophical questions more often than not about virtue and the nature of the good life. He urged craftsmen, poets, politicians, and citizens of all stations to question their own values and the very purpose of living. So this proves that Socrates was actually trying to get, getting to actually know more about how other people think and how other people would reason with the questions that he was actually questioning, those people that he would deal with at that time. This is his point of actually moralist, because as you are listening to that one, that he is actually a person that was trying to dig deeper in finding out with those people that were actually, with those professions in those people, what were they thinking about life? What were their reasons? What were their thoughts? And what their insights, in everything that he was asking them. He would actually once he get those response, he would use them as a point of wisdom in making sure that he uses them when he's dealing with other people. He would go on the streets and try to find out and more about other people's thinking. There's quite a lot of things that Socrates was actually involved. He was a soldier at that time. He was a soldier. He was a person that would resist the physical pain. And I remember in my reading, one of his exercises that he would do was to actually, he would meditate for a period of 36 hours. You know, sometimes he would walk on the ice. You know, sometimes actually was known as one of the strongest soldiers of that time, in his time. Yes, there were arguments that he was actually not doing what he was supposed to do, that is to live the life, or perhaps like to worship the gods that were worshipped by the state at that time, of which that brings a point of argument that he was at some point like fighting with the state. And as he was fighting with the state, it's something that had landed him to the court, where he happened to where he sought himself being like, you know, in the court, like being questioned about his way of thinking and all of that, of which he would argue, and his argument point would be, he was not seeing anything wrong on the things that he was doing, because he was actually helping people to think more. He was actually helping those people that were calling themselves like you know, like professions with wisdom and all of that, people that would change the system and the way of doing things. He would actually challenge them, and in that regard, in that court case, that is how he would respond to that. He was not doing anything wrong. It's just that he would help people to actually understand the value of life. And that takes us to the point where he actually says that like an unexamined life is not worth living. So that is exactly that's what he said. That is exactly what he was doing. So he was busy examining life, you know, in different areas of life, different perspectives and all of that. So, you know, those are the ways that he was actually trying to utilize in trying to defend himself, you know, when he was actually in the court, in the trial, you know, trying to, I did mention that. So basically Socrates was actually, but I'd like to touch base on few pointers that actually were making him a person that would outstand, like, which is something that I like, because, you know, one of the things that I like is that, you know, sometimes when you get a person that is more intelligent, you would love to hear how that person meets with a person that can challenge him, you know, in person, and take him on debates, and trying to hear how will he take himself out of the situation through his reasoning, you know. First, the other point that I like is it's one of his thoughts, one of his thinking, where he says calling philosophy down from the heaven, meaning that this man was actually believing in God, which is this man was a believer, you know, in so to speak. He was believing in a superpower, you know, and all of that. And how like to explain more on that, you will get it when he was sentenced, because he was actually sentenced to death. And he would defend himself by saying that the people that were doing wrong to him, they will be harmed more by the doing of the wrong to himself than himself, the recipient of the wrong. Okay, first let me touch base on the point of the person that took him on, which is one of the sophists. Now, at that time, they were called sophists, but this time we call them coaches. We call them life coaches, because they are actually of the similar duties as coaches, because sophists were people that were actually trained to make people to actually better up their path of career, which is here now. Socrates is challenged by Protagoras. Protagoras is one of the guys that challenged him in person, where Protagoras was actually a most influential sophist that arrived at that time. And he was actually a very famous person, and he's got his sayings, which is one of his thoughts, where he would say that, I'm referring to Protagoras, man is the measure of all things, of the things that are, that they are, of the things that are not, that they are not. This makes, which is an individual, each individual, the standard of what is true and false, which would be true of ordinary perceptions and of physical things, which is, you may taste wine as sweet while someone else may find it bitter, so it must be both of these things, but also about ethical views. So this is the man that challenged Socrates. This is the man that took him on. This is one of the people that made Socrates to think more. If at some point he wanted to leave, philosophy, but he actually got like a credit, got accredited of his thoughts when one of the gods of that time, when he was asked what is the best way of living, and then the Apollo, it was a god of that time, to that area of Athens, and then the Apollo responded that Socrates' ways, his philosophical thoughts and everything, and his actions are the good ways of doing, which is he's on the right path. He's actually planting good principles to people, the ways of doing right. And one of other things that I like about Socrates' thoughts and his methods is like the knowledge, where he says knowledge is equal to virtue, which is, according to him, if a person fully understands that the good is, then he will do that good. Put another way, he identified goodness and knowledge, saying that to know the good is to do the good. Like a person that uses drugs doesn't know that to use drugs is bad. If he would know, then he would stop, And also the other point, which is called wrongdoing harms the doer, And that is where he was actually, narrating his points of view during the trial, where he says, I quote, "You two gentlemen of the jury must look forward to death with confidence and fix your minds on this belief, which is certain, that nothing can harm a good man either in life or after death, and his fortunes are not a matter of indifference to the gods. For my own part, I bear no grudge at all against those who condemn me and accuse me, although it was not with this kind intention that they did so, but because they thought that they were hurting me, and that is culpable of them. Now it is time that we are going, I to die and you to live, but which of us has the happier prospect is unknown to anyone but God." Those were the sayings of Socrates, meaning, like, I repeat my saying that I said earlier on, that Socrates was a man that believed in God, and he actually, believed that what was done to him to be sentenced to death, and actually it was wrong, and the wrong that was being done to him will harm those that were doing it. So, meaning that he was on the right path. He was right to those things that he was doing. But one other thing that I would like to mention more is that, to my last point, is that he was a good man. He was a man that was avoiding the belief that there was a God, but in some of his statements that he was actually believing in God. And one other point that I liked about his methods, it's called inductive reasoning, which is like one of his actually actions or things that he was doing was called euthypro. It was actually one of a prominent religious figure about to bring charges of impiety against his own people. So literally, Socrates was a good man. He was a moralist. He believed that doing good was actually good. because doing good was good for actually getting better as a person, and those were actually his actions. But my point of argument is that though that he was a moralist, he was doing great things, he was doing good things, but in general, like, I mean, why would you fight with the state? You understand? Why wouldn't you find a way to present yourself in a state, and after that make sure that your thoughts are presented nicely and become a part of a state whereby they can be utilized to improve states, And yeah, after that, then he died. He died because he was actually given a hemlock to poison himself, and died. And then after that death, then he would actually be taken, like maybe by the family, to go and bury it and all of that. But hemlock is also a poison that was actually used at that time, because it would numb your body, and then after that it will irritate your body, and once you make movements, then it would work quicker in your body, so that you die quicker. So he suggested that he would be given that hemlock so that he can drink it, and then after he drank it, then he would die. And then, though that some people were suggested that he can escape, which is, he gave a view that to escape is like a revenge. It's like admitting to the sentence that you were given. And to submit to the sentence that you were given, that means that you admit that you were literally wrong. You admit that. So, yeah, like Crito was the person that look, the best thing that you can do is to escape, because you've got more value to your children and to your friends and to your exercises that we're doing on philosophy, because you still need to write more books, you still need to do good things about this, because you have students that you still need to educate more about your philosophical thoughts and methods and all of that. So, I mean, that is my argument. He failed that part, and as he was failing that part, he should have actually lived longer if he would have escaped, or maybe went to exile. Because if you think that your views and your thoughts and your exercises are better, they need more, sort of like sort of ways to actually give other people to learn from. You've got to do something, about that. But he refused to do that. So he ended up dying, but part of his significance was that which I've said, and which is like he was calling himself like like his mother. His mother was a midwife, and his father was a sculptor. So he would call himself a midwife of people's thoughts, because through his people's reasoning, that is the people that he was questioning, and then he would actually act as a midwife in helping them to better, improve their thoughts and all of that. So that is actually a short lecture about Socrates, moralists, how he lived his life, what he did, and the significance of what he has lived for, and all of that. Thank you, people. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching this video. There will be other videos that will upload, which is on other philosophers that have actually mentioned on the advertisement of the post. Thank you for this little short lecture. Bye bye.